So our boat came with 2 hatches, the one that's on it, and then this one, which Randy said was the winter hatch, which essentially is just a plywood one that's rotting, mostly held together with duct tape, as you can see. That's in pretty bad shape. I'm going to make a new hatch because the one on it is also starting to show some signs of age. I'm not the biggest fan of exterior woodwork on boats because they require constant maintenance. Current plan is to build a hatch with a lot of foam and fiberglass it. So the thought is to make it out of 6 panels. And then they'll have these cutouts are for windows, so we'll get light that comes through it because right now it's pretty dark inside our boat when the hatch is closed. And this will provide us with lots more natural light inside, which will be good. And this hatch isn't very domed, and so 3 panels fairly closely approximates the curve that it is. And then still allows us some space to put polycarbonate windows in, so we get lots of natural light. The plan is to have the aft edge and then the forward edge be like vertical pieces of foam that are wrapped in carbon fiber and fiberglass to give it lots of stiffness so it doesn't flex. And then also we're going to put one down the center so that the panels don't flex down the center, because really it's not supported on the front and back edge, so it's just the sides that are going to hold it up. So by creating stringers this way, it'll hold all of the weight. So then we'll do a few layers of heavy glass over top of the top and a couple layers on the bottom to give it the impact resistance. The foam allows it to be lighter but still have more stiffness and feel a solid glass. So here I have some carbon fiber. The goal tonight is to wrap these stringers or ribs that are going to stiffen the companionway hatch, and that way it will be able to take all the compression loading, I guess, of a wave or someone standing on it without buckling. Carbon fiber is known to be really stiff and strong in that aspect. It is also more brittle, but having vertical planes that counteract the bending force of weight on the center of the hatch will add the strength, whereas foam is not typically as strong as like wood, which the original hatch was made out of teak and some plywood. So I'm trying to mimic the same strength using carbon fiber, and then the entire thing is going to get covered in fiberglass to give it the impact strength of point loading so we don't damage the structure, but the carbon fiber is there to give it the stiffness that it needs to not flex.
Well, I won't even pretend to fully understand the design process, but I know that Philip does, and that's what's really important. Last winter, we pulled our rudder, and while extending it, we added a strip of Kevlar and carbon fiber weave to the leading edge to help protect against damage should we hit anything. I should say, when we hit something. We all know that there are 2 types of sailors, those who have run aground and those who lie about running aground. We fall into the first group, so we just want to mitigate potential future damage. Back to the project at hand. When Philip laid up the carbon fiber Kevlar strip, we had to snip off the very end, and once it cured, Philip started to get all sorts of ideas on what else he could make out of this delightful material. So now we have carbon fiber light shields, carbon fiber in our new floor panels, but you're gonna have to wait a little bit before you get to see those, and a handful of other odds and ends. So keep in mind that the next clip is an engineer doing engineer things like geeking out about weight, strength, and point loading.
So it's this one, which has 2 layers on it. It's just like there is no flex to that, which is good. This is gonna be the front one. And then I think this is the smallest one, which like has some flex, but it's got a decent amount of rigidity. Never actually used just like straight carbon fiber before, so there's, I think it's 6-ounce carbon fiber, and there's 2 layers on that are wrapped around, and so it's, I mean, it weighs hardly anything, but I mean it is like just incredibly stiff, strong, but it's so light. I have used a lot of fiberglass, but this is different. This is more like what 4 layers of 1708 would feel like, or two wraps around. And I don't even know if it would have that same. I can still feel a little bit of like point load flex if I push, but not much. It's incredible. I'm truly impressed. I don't know. I get geeked out about fun things like engineering things like material science and that. This is the forward edge of the hatch, which is buried inside the turtle hatch. And so this is it's got a single layer of carbon fiber on it, 1/2 inch foam, and then I've got 6 foam panels, and then I've got a center like stringer in there with double layer of carbon fiber, and the stringers are in there to help stiffen it all up so it doesn't, as if someone stepped on it and put pressure, it doesn't flex down to the same extent as it would if it was just a single layer of 1/2 inch. It would have more of a tendency to sag under weight and pressure. And then over here, this is our the front edge of the hatch, which is really the aft edge in the boat. And this will have a like raised grab edge so you can pull the hatch closed. This is double layer of carbon fiber over it. I still got to trim up the edges. I just haven't brought the multi-tool over, and it's hard to cut this double layer. Then I've got to glue on a piece of 1/2 inch foam on the forward edge of this piece. And this, so then the curve of all the panels is actually going to sit on this edge on the shelf. That way it gives it a little bit more meat to allow locking mechanisms in here in the future, so I can lock the boat. And also it will, as it sits here, most of the weight is probably going to be on the back edge of it, as the other part will be buried. I laminated a piece around the front, and I have a piece of foam behind here, and this will be on the side of the hatch that you pull on. And this is actually going to go between this and then the front tall piece that's going to get glued into it. I'm just trying to lock everything together, and I ran out of peel ply. Otherwise I'd have also done a carbon strip over top of this seam and maybe one on the back edge, just to make sure everything is really locked together and really stiff. Alright, so I just skimmed most of this foam and fiberglass with slightly thickened epoxy. I'm going to now go back through with some quite thick epoxy, fill all the screw holes, put a little fillet at the front edge, and then fill any other gaps or low spots. That way I get good adhesion between the layer of biaxial that I'm putting down the foam. And this is the underside of the hatch, so it should take a lot less abuse. On the top side, from impacts, another reason I put epoxy down is I'm not going to be able to wet out both sides of the glass prior to putting it on, so it's going to be a little more difficult to fully wet out. We got peel ply over the whole thing, And I put 2 layers of 6 ounce around each of the window openings, and then a layer of carbon across the seam. I'm hoping the carbon kind of locks all the window openings together, but also gives it a little bit extra stiffness for that center seam. My goal for this is that I can stand or jump on it and it's not going to break. But it's yeah, it's a lot of work. Sometimes as you're doing stuff, you don't realize how long it takes, and just looked at the time stamp on the video and it's like 55 minutes. I'm like, whoo, it's a lot of time spent putting glass down.
So here's the thing, I started with 4.5 hours of footage for this video that I had to sift through, and that is not even a small portion of the work that Philip had to put into just this one project, and I have been making a fair number of videos about these projects. There is no video about the design and thought process, the research, the discussions on what products to use, second guessing, none of that's included. I really try to portray these as accurately and as honestly as possible, the effort and the force of will that goes into each of these projects, but there is not really a way to capture all of these moments. This project started months ago. Arguably most of these projects started after the first time we looked at Bombadil over 2 years ago. And when discussing which boat was on the market that we wanted to buy, we would talk about what each one needed in order to go sailing, and additionally what each one needed before going cruising. And if I'm honest, the dreaming phase is probably my favorite part of thinking about what we're going to be doing next. Watching Philip making those dreams a reality is second, and last on the list is actually enjoying the fruits of all of that labor. Mostly because by the time that we've started to enjoy what we've worked so hard for, we've already started dreaming again on whatever's next. Fortunately for Bombadil, I am pretty emotionally attached to the BOYB, the big old yellow boat, so someday instead of dreaming and scheming about how I really want to refit the galley, we'll be planning on the next passage and where we're going to drop the hook in some uncharted bay somewhere, and I cannot wait.
Alright, it has been a few days since I've done any video. I've done some work on the Companionway Hatch. So I've put 2 layers of glass around these. I think I videoed that. And then I cut out each opening, that way I could kind of see stuff, and then I can backfill the spacing between them with some thickened epoxy. That way the foam on the inside is protected. And then I did put a layer of 1708 over top of the whole thing, and that gives it some impact strength and also has stiffened it up. I have knelt on top of it to make sure that it doesn't flex too much and can take load. So I think structurally I am all set. I do need to clean up these edges and figure out if I want another layer of glass on top or bottom. This front edge, because it's just cut, is going to need to be rounded over, and then also I'll probably put 2 or 3 layers of glass over top of this, as this will get a lot of abuse, and this front edge especially. And then the bottom edge of this is still just a cut edge, so I'll need to round that and glass that shut. So there's still a fair bit of work left on, I would say, the structural side before it's fairing and sanding and painting on that side. Alright, so when I initially built this, I wasn't 100% sure how I was going to attach the rails that it's going to slide on to the sides. And so when I built it, I didn't build it quite wide enough. So it's 36.25 width right now. I really need it to be about 37. So I'm going to add a 1/2 inch of foam on each side, and then I'll cut that down as needed, and that'll give me the width I need. And then the other thing is, on this front edge, I used the back rib to calculate this height, and that wasn't quite high enough, so I need to extend this face up by at least a 1/2 inch, because this is part of what stops it as it slides back, so it doesn't slide too far back. So by bringing it up, that'll create a nice positive stop when I slide the hatch open, that it doesn't go too far and get jammed. So I gotta do both of those. I did go through today and clean up these faces because I took better measurements of the actual boat, so that they're the right spacing. And then this one, which is just a rib in the middle to help with stiffness and support, I cut it back so there's like a 1/2 inch gap on it. That way it's not dragging or creating any more friction. Yeah, this I think will actually be nice to help open it, because right now you kind of like either there's a rope pull in our current one, like up in one of these corners, actually at this corner, and it kind of works. And I think if the slides were better, it would work better. But now you're pulling, and so it like kind of twists and then kind of jams in. So I normally just like smear my hand and pull, but Heather can't quite do that, and so I think she'll be able to use this as like a pull to open it and help her open it from the inside, which would be nice. But the big thing is having those windows in there will let in so much light, and that will be nice. So it's fall right now, and it's getting dark earlier, and I got in the boat the other day and I was like, man, it is dark in here. So well, any extra light will be a huge benefit. The plan for, there's rails that get put on under here. I can't point with the camera hand. So yeah, there's gonna be rails that go right here. Those are gonna be made out of UHMW, which is this white plastic right here. So I'll cut a slot and I'll made up to the boat. There's pieces of stainless that are screwed onto the slides. Cut a groove in there, and that will allow for slide, and it will be bolted into this. So at some point I have some bronze nuts showing up that I'll embed in here with thickened epoxy, and I'll wax the stainless bolts. That way the epoxy doesn't stick to the wax, but the bolts or the nuts are in here, and then I can bolt that in. So it's through bolted from the bottom, there's no holes from the top. And then bronze, it doesn't suffer crevice corrosion, which being embedded in epoxy is gonna have crevice corrosion potential. So that's why I'm not using stainless, but using bronze, which is a lot more expensive actually. Alright, so I have a first coat of fairing compound on the underside of our Companionway hatch, which is why it's all nice uniform-ish color green. This will give me a nice layer that's easier to sand than the glass. I sanded all the high spots before, and now this will allow me to sand and like hopefully get nice and smooth. I'll probably, because I'm not very good at it, I'll probably have like 4 or 5 layers that I'll have to do on each side. So it's the beginning of the end. We're getting closer. You can see it's just like the dark green is all new fairing. So we're just filling in low spots, scratches, pinholes. That's what we're trying to fill in now. And I do have to come back through and like really clean up all the frames. It's way better than it was. I'll probably have at least one more round of fairing on the window frame opening section. I did a second round of fairing on the top side of the hatch. Mostly trying to like square up all our edges in here and fill in any low spots. So I'm gonna sand it all down. Hopefully it's close. Reality is It's gonna need at least one more, I'm sure.